Is J Fingers your real name?
It is not.
It is not. Okay. That is it your stage name?
It is. It's my
Oh.
nom de plume or whatever. I'm really impressed that you asked that because most people don't. Most people they just don't. I did have someone say that she knew a person with the last name Finger, and so just assumed that yes, this is this is your real name, or but it's not. It's a college nickname, and it was actually given to me by I'm not going to call them bullies,
Oh.
but
Mhm.
it's a crew of upperclassmen when I was a
Mhm.
freshman. Crew of upperclassmen that I wanted to kind of hang around and be seen with, and they let me kind of hang around, but they also made fun of me. And Fingers was the nickname that they came up with. It's actually movie based. They were watching Marked for Death, I believe it was, Steven Seagal film. And there's a character named Fingers, and he goes crazy in one scene. And I happened to walk into the room when that scene was going on, and they're just like, your fingers, your fingers. And it stuck. But rather than be embarrassed by it, I embraced it. And it really just got to the point where everyone started calling me Fingers, even professors and everything like that. So I've been J Fingers for many, many years now. And as I say, I've embraced it. It really speaks to who I am, my true personality, I think.
I thought it was for tapping the keys of the keyboard. Okay, so there's another story to it. Do you still keep in contact with those upperclassmen?
Some of them, some of them. But eventually, I just met up with another group of like-minded people, and we became a really strong crew, essentially a family. And those people, I'm very much, in contact, I'm daily contact with those guys. So I left the upperclassmen alone and stuck with the community that really embraced me for who I was.
How is your name a blessing and a curse?
It's a blessing because it's memorable. Um, People they don't forget Jay Fingers. I queried a screenplay to this manager, and he gave me a polite pass, but he saw me on Twitter and remembered the name and started following me and engaging with me. And that's just one of those things. I know that it's a memorable name when people see my books, they see the name, and even if they don't read the book or whatever, they know, oh, Jay Fingers, he's an author. Um, in another lifetime, I actually promoted parties. And, my name would be on the flyer, and people would associate me with a good party, a good time. So, in that way, yes, it's definitely a blessing. But curse wise, people look at the name and they think, oh, there's something funny there. Is there anything salacious going on with this guy? It's so ridiculous. So there's that. I do have to contend with that. But honestly, for the most part, people accept it. They don't come at me in a negative way about the name.
Right. I mean, I could see it too being for a musician as well. You're tapping the keys of the piano or whatever.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
interesting.
I have had people, yeah, do you play the piano or are you a DJ or something like that? So, yeah.
Can we talk about what the little boy was like who grew up wanting to write an award-winning screenplay?
Sure. He was he was very much an outcast. I'll say that. It still is an outcast. But I grew up in a time where being a filmmaker, being a screenwriter, that wasn't a goal that everyone had. That wasn't a career that everyone looked at and thought, oh, okay, I still grew up in the doctor, lawyer, president, astronaut era. You can be whatever. But, always, having this dream, people looked at it kind of funny. They thought that it wasn't realistic, didn't even know what it was. I do remember someone saying to me, filmmaker, what is that? What does that mean? You make films, you make movies. Oh, you want to be a director? Well, why didn't you say that? So it was looked at as being a strange goal, a strange aspiration. But my love of movies was undeniable. Everyone in my family, they could see it, and they did encourage it. I got my love of movies from both of my parents, from my mother and my father, and so they would they would do a lot of things to kind of help facilitate the stream. There weren't many screenplays that were available at the time, but the ones that were available, my mother found and would give to me. Books on screenwriting. I think at the time, Sid Field was probably, when I was young, was probably the only book that was out there, Sid Field Screenplay. And she got that for me and I devoured it. Just little things like making sure we had cable so that I could watch movies on HBO and Cinemax. Like these were things that I know my parents did. My father always took me to the movies. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was looked at as an uncommon dream, an uncommon kind of goal. But I do thank my parents and my immediate family for supporting that goal. Uh, and I guess they realized that I was serious about it because it's I've never wavered from that. It's never been like, okay, now I want to be a firefighter, or now I do want to be president or whatever. I've always had the goal of being a filmmaker, specifically being a screenwriter, writing movies and doing that.
Why do you say you were an outcast?
Because again, it was uncommon. People didn't know what I was saying, what I was talking about. My interests were far, different from everyone else's interests. I wasn't the kid that was outside playing football or climbing trees. Maybe every once in a while, but like kids have I think all these interests that can be seen as normal. It's like, oh, okay, I understand. He yeah, he likes football, or she might like fashion or whatever. Um, but for me to say I like movies, I love movies. That's what I want to do. I want to write. And I'll also say this, especially like within the Black community, not to say that intelligence is looked down upon. That's because that's not what I want to communicate. But an intelligent, young Black child, is just kind of looked at differently. It's like the Steve Urkel thing. That was a very real thing. You're just looked at as an other. And if you have interests that don't align with what people are used to, or what they think you should be into, then yeah, you'll be othered. You'll just be looked at strangely and treated strangely as well.
And you grew up where?
I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, the Orange Mound neighborhood of Memphis, Tennessee. I always have to mention that when talking about Memphis. Just it was like the largest Black community outside of Harlem at one point. And if you think about like hip hop music, the hip hop that came out of Memphis primarily like came out of Orange Mound, 8 Ball and MJG. They're like the first big act to hip hop act to come out of Memphis. So.
And you left there to go to Florida State or Miami?
University of Miami.
University of Miami. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, and that the thinking behind that, I applied to several different film schools. I applied to like NYU, UCLA, USC. I applied to some other schools that didn't really have film programs, but I wanted to follow in the footsteps of some of my favorite filmmakers, like Spike Lee. Spike Lee went to Morehouse for undergrad, so I applied to Morehouse. But I ended up going to the University of Miami, and it was because my father said that it's tropical. The weather is similar to the weather you'd get out in California. I don't think that's true, but that was part of it. And he also thought that going to a school like Miami and being in their film program would make me a big fish in a small pond. Whereas, oh, if you go to, NYU, or if you go to UCLA, everyone, that's where they go to film school, and you won't stand out as much. So that's why I ended up going to Miami.
Jay, you say you've been pursuing screenwriting for decades?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I'm including my childhood in that, of course, but yeah, I would say decades. I was in a program for gifted youth. It's called Clue, Creative Learning in a Unique Environment, and we had to do kind of like a career thing. What do you want to be when you grow up? And we took photos and we made this display, kind of like a science project display with the photos and our statements and everything. And I still have the photo, and that's why I'm mentioning this, because I still have the photo. And in the photo, there's actually a book. It's like a mock-up of a book. It's got the book cover. And the title of the book is Everybody Wants to Rule the World. The reason that was the title of the book is because at the time I was obsessed with the film Real Genius. And the Tears for Fears song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, that was the theme song for the film. So that was my way of saying, I want to write a movie. I want to, there's even a little mock sticker on the cover that said, now being made into a major motion picture. That's what the tie-in books used to look like back then. So yeah, I had to be like, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 years old when we did that. And, I'm in my 40s now. And this is a dream that I've been pursuing, like, all my life, whether it was just being obsessed with film as a kid, going to film school, writing screenplays, just, doing the work. I've essentially been doing it all my life. Yeah.
Why did it take you so long to move to Los Angeles?
Uh, so when I was wrapping up things in Miami, I thought that there was going to be an opportunity to sell a script. I'd gotten in contact with the manager. He was doing his manager thing, and it all fell apart. So when it fell apart, that was a brief period where I fell out of love with movies, not with writing, but with movies. And that was when I decided that I was going to move to New York. I'd always wanted to live in New York, and I just felt like, my time in Miami had come to an end. I'd wasted enough time down there, and I went to New York just to live that life. And I loved it. I loved it. And because I loved New York so much, and the people that I met, the community that I made there, and just living there, just the experience, living in New York, like I feel like once you've lived there, you can't live anywhere else. Nothing else can compare. I didn't want to leave. I started writing again. I started writing screenplays again. I started really pursuing this goal hardcore. But I realized that at least for me, it wasn't going to happen from New York. And I just resisted for a very long time. But finally, when I came to that decision, that conclusion, I made the decision to come on out.
So really writing screenplays and the entertainment, even though they shoot shows there and things like that, it's not the same.
I don't feel it's the same. I don't feel it's the same. Los Angeles is where everything happens. It's where meetings are held and deals are made. And I just feel like everything still takes place in Los Angeles, and it's still where you need to be. I know a lot of people say, oh, you can live anywhere. And it's true, but I think to a certain extent. I still think that some time has to be spent in LA, even if you end up, moving back home, or, just moving elsewhere. I think that some time in LA is necessary. So, yeah, I just didn't see it happening in New York. And I feel like I made the right decision because in the about 3 years that I've been out here, I think that things have really picked up tremendously, and for me, that's validation that I made the right decision.
And you joined a screenwriting group right away?
It was pretty soon, yeah, after I moved. So when I first moved to LA, I lived within walking distance of the Writers Guild of America. And I didn't have a job or anything, so I had a lot of free time. And I would just go to the Writers Guild and hang out. And they have all these great programs. They have people that come and speak, and they have this great library where you can read practically any screenplay in the world. And so just hanging out there and meeting people, and going to the programs. And at one of the programs, they had the writing staff of The Shy, which is a show on Showtime. And Lena Waithe was there, and the other writers and producers of the show. And just speaking with them, I spoke to one of the writers, and he's like, oh, we kind of vibe. I see, a lot of myself in you, and here, take my number. And we kept in contact, and he put together a writers group, with other writers that he'd met and I guess saw potential in. And so that became the writers group. And some people fell off, everyone didn't stay, but a good number of us did. And yeah, we met regularly. We would, share our work and just encourage each other, help each other with whatever we needed, whether it's like a log line or query letter or whatever. It's been very beneficial, and I mean, they're my friends now, even outside of writing. We don't always have to talk about screenwriting, pick up the phone. Hey, how's your day? Oh, heard you got a new puppy, do you have pictures or whatever? So the people in this group have become my friends, and really helped me to establish a bit of a foundation out here.
Jay, we want you to think about the sacrifices that you've made in your life to get you to this moment right now, right here, today. What are those sacrifices? How many years would you say that's been?
Oh, I would say that, I would honestly say that I've probably sacrificed most of my life in pursuit of this. I'm single, don't have a girlfriend, don't have any kids. And I look at all of my friends, some of the friends that I mentioned earlier from college and everything. They've got beautiful families, lovely kids, great careers, nice homes. And those are things that I sometimes think that I might have if I hadn't been pursuing screenwriting as hard as I've been. I think that I probably just would have maybe done something else, but settled into that nice normal career and have, the home and the family and everything like that. Another thing is family, like my sisters, my nieces and nephews. I didn't really go back to Memphis often to visit once I left. I mean, I tried every once in a while, but I felt that this is what I've got to do. This is, this is what I'm pursuing. And one of my sisters even told me that she had this discussion with the other siblings, is that Jay's dream is bigger than the rest of us, and he's got to chase that. And when she told me that she had that discussion, it made me feel a bit guilty, because she's right in that I have kind of ignored them for this bigger dream. It's something that I'm working on. I'm trying to see family a lot more. You just make that time to really live a life outside of the pursuit, because I don't want to achieve success one day and then not have anyone to share it with. Whether we're talking about a romantic relationship or whether we're just talking about family. My parents have passed away, and one of my sisters passed away recently. And I sometimes, do feel guilty. It's like I've been chasing this, and maybe I should have spent more time with them. So
Okay, and I honor that, and I can understand how you might feel that way. What if, you talked about being an outcast. What if not everybody is meant and is really cut out for, just because someone has the quote normal life and 9-to-5 job and the trappings of success, doesn't mean they don't have other like creative longings. And so it's a trade-off. And so some people might know my creative longing is stronger than wanting to have certain things.
Right.
And being okay with that. And I know this society doesn't always honor that. I get that. I understand. As a woman who doesn't have children, so I understand how it can be looked at as you're selfish or whatever. And I'm okay with that. And just I think that's a curse a lot of creative people bear, Is it okay that I haven't done these certain things, but I have something else that I'm chasing or I'm actively doing.
Right.
And just being okay with that.
Right. Yeah.
I guess it's up to the individual.
No, you're absolutely. Yeah, I feel that. I feel like, I have to now do this. I have to achieve some sort of success. And when I say success, I don't mean like millions of dollars and, arms full of gold trophies. Yeah, I just want to make a living in this business. I want to make a living as a screenwriter. And I feel that if I can do that, then the sacrifices definitely would have been worth it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
What does sacrifice mean to you?
That's a great question. When I think about what I've just said, I don't know if Sorry.
No, it's okay. What if I text you, hey Jay, we're all at TGI Fridays right now for happy hour. Can you meet us there?
Probably say no.
You sure? Got these great potato skins and we're having drinks. And...
Look, I love potato skins and I love alcoholic beverages. But if I'm working on something, or if I feel that I have the time to go to Fridays, could probably spend that time outlining or rewriting. I feel like so much of my time is already taken up by endeavors that aren't really serving, this dream. I've got to give hours to the day job, and I still have to just take care of myself, life things. And so the little bit of free time that I have, I often feel like I need to dedicate that to the craft. Sure, every once in a while I like to, have fun, but but I would probably decline an invitation to just hang out. I know that makes me sound like I'm not a fun individual. I promise I am.
I think after you can get some of that out of your system after a while. I can only speak for myself, and sometimes you see that some of that goes nowhere. And then what's really worth it to you? We only have so much time.
Right.
So I don't think it sounds bad.
But I'm like I said, I'm making those efforts. Had like a fantastic overseas trip with my friends earlier this year. When we thought things were safe, it was safe enough to go. And it was a blast. And some of them I hadn't seen in years, and it was great to see them and see their families and hang out with with them. So I'm making that effort. I am making that effort.
Sure, and then there's the whole John Sayles, you've got to go out and have a life before you can write about one kind of thing, and that's understandable. But I know, especially here, and I'm sure in New York as well, maybe other cities, it's easy to get caught up with a lot of that,
Oh, definitely.
you know,
Definitely.
especially when you're younger, and then all the dramas that go around with that, and, you know, some of that, it doesn't go anywhere. So
Yeah.
it's making that decision. Yeah. Do you feel like you've sacrificed enough, or is there more you could be doing?
I mean, there's definitely more I could be doing, but I do think that I've sacrificed plenty. It's about trying to find that balance, I guess. You know, when can I take the break? When can I attend to other things? And just be confident that the screenwriting pursuit will take care of itself. You know, to trust that things are happening the way that they should, which will then, you know, allow me to have that breather to have drinks at Fridays and potato skins, or to, you know, take a trip, you know, with the family.
Right. I mean, you know, there's some people that go on these like sort of almost like monastic retreats within their own lives to work on whatever, and they shut everything out. And maybe that is necessary. They're less like tech monk, and they can't be bothered, and they're doing whatever they're, you know, or none or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how long does that really pay off.
I wonder, because I've done that. You know, I've taken those periods where I've kind of shut everyone and everything out so that I can, say, work on a script, you know, get something done. And while, you know, I'm usually happy with the work that I produced or what have you, yeah, was that sacrifice really worth it? Was taking that period and shutting everyone and everything out, was it really worth it? I don't know.
What about the sort of Hunter S. Thompson approach? This like gonzo journalism where you're hanging out with motorcycle gangs and try, you know, infiltrate, you know, going on the road with a band as a roadie, or, you know, just like, would you ever go on sort of the very opposite to come up with a story idea?
I could see myself doing something like that. Yeah. But because, you know, I understand what the goal is. Like hanging out at Fridays, I don't see, you know, what the goal is. Aside from, you know, having fun and getting drunk and you know, potato skins, I don't really see, you know, that turning into something that would benefit the pursuit. But as you mentioned with the Hunter S. Thompson example, you know, I could see, okay, this is going to turn into a story. This will turn into a script. This will spark, you know, an idea of something, you know, a creative endeavor that is worth pursuing. So yeah, sure, I could see myself doing something like that.
What do you say to people who tell you it's impossible to make it as a screenwriter in Hollywood?
That's nonsense. It's not impossible. Now, if you're trying to chase the Joe Esterhaas or Shane Black and make millions of dollars, I mean, that might be a bit difficult. But I think that it's certainly possible to achieve success as a screenwriter. I see it every day on Twitter when I log on. There's a community, screenwriting Twitter, and people share, you know, their successes. They share, you know, their good news. And every day someone tweets about finding a manager or placing in a contest or being staffed in a room. And you get the occasional big deal. You know, so-and-so is adapting this novel, you know, for a big studio, or so-and-so sold a spec script. You know, that happens occasionally. And seeing that lets me know that it's certainly possible. There is one of my buddies, Mark Sanderson, screenwriter, and he wrote a book, I believe it's called Journey, The Screenwriter's Journey.
I think we have it right here. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, yeah. It's a great book, and what I love about that book is that it lays out a realistic path to having a screenwriting career. And that is the path that I think most people, you know, if you're chasing this dream, that's the path you should look at, you know, is establishing a career, a realistic career. And yeah, it's totally doable. You know, you can work in indie film. You can work on these streaming services. their series, or even like social media platforms are doing like scripted stuff. I have a buddy who wrote, I think, for Facebook, a scripted series for Facebook. It's there. It can definitely happen. It's not an impossible dream.
Sure. I've even seen like some of these stores do their own web series.
Yeah.
Home Goods did one where it's really funny actually. The girl's like locked in a Home Goods.
Oh wow.
And she's the one that's in, is it Brittany Wins the Race? Or forgive me, I'm gonna get bashed for that. But yeah, and it's funny. She's locked in this Home Goods and she's having like this relationship drama, and it's funny.
Oh wow. Got to check that out.
So yeah, there's different things, and then of course the IKEA one with Ileana Douglas. And
Right. Yeah.
do you have a writing mentor, Jay?
I do.
How'd you make that connection?
This was the person that I met at the Writers Guild. His name is Marcus, and he's done well for himself. Worked on several successful projects and's got projects, in the works. And again, it was just kind of talking with him and him seeing something in me and making that offer to stay in contact. And he's really been not only a big help, but also a massive inspiration. Just to go back to looking at someone having a successful career, he keeps projects, in line. He finishes one, he hops on the next one, and he's just been very supportive, taking the time to work with me on my scripts. I don't know of anyone who would take that amount of time to work with someone, both in a group and individually. And that's the thing, because he works with entire writing groups, right? He's got, me, but he's got several other people that he mentors. And the amount of time that he takes with me, I'm like, wow, he does this with, say, 8 other people. And he's working on his own projects, So he's an amazing, amazing person. And I'm very thankful that he saw something in me.
And you met him when you said when you came to LA, you were hanging out at the Writers Guild reading scripts, and you saw him there?
Well, I met him. They held a program where they invited the writing staff of his show to the Writers Guild, and so they spoke, to a large crowd. And then after the event was over, people were hanging around, socializing, and that's when we first started to speak.
I see. Okay. What were some of the first scripts you were reading when you got to the Writers Guild?
My favorite screenwriter is Shane Black. So I wanted to read some Shane Black scripts. So I got my hands on Lethal Weapon. And I also got my hands on Iron Man 3, which is under the, I think the working, not the working title, but the title that they use, so that the production title, so that everyone won't know, oh, this is a big Marvel production. And that title is Caged, which I just think is funny. I don't know why I think it's funny. But I really want to see Shane Black's style applied to a big budget action, like Marvel spectacle. And so those were 2 that I got into. But then I also just read like television scripts that you can't, find anywhere. I love shows like 30 Rock, Sex and the City, of the TV shows that I watch, because I don't watch very many TV shows. But, just grabbing those scripts and just seeing, like how they were written, how, those shows were laid out. It's just very interesting. So I was just consuming whatever, whatever I could, looking at the list of available screenplays in the library and just, okay, I want that one. Oh, I like this writer, so I want that one. And,
Who's your favorite character on Sex and the City?
I always switch them up. Some days it's Charlotte, some days it's Miranda. I would say that probably Miranda.
Okay.
just simply because I think that, her personality is closest to mine. So Miranda.
But it can vary, right?
It could vary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Depending on the season.
Right. I funny, at least to me, Sex and the City story. So when the movie was coming out, I was in New York, and me, massive Sex and the City fan, I'm like, oh, the movie! I can't wait to see the movie. This was, they were still doing like, Thursday night is like the first night, but it wasn't early Thursday showings at this point. It was more like midnight. Midnight, that's when the first, showing of the film takes place. So I bought my ticket for the midnight showing, get off work, I go to the theater, and I'm like the only man, but then like I'm the only black man in line with all these white women to see Sex and the City at midnight. And I know it had, like, it must have been a strange sight, but I started talking to like these women in line, like, oh, I'm so excited for this. I can't wait to see what happens, boo, boo, boo. And I think that they were impressed with my knowledge of the show because, I mean, from season 1, I was into it. So it was just a great time. It's just a great time. And then when the film was over, we're all still kind of hanging out in front of it's like 2:00 in the morning, but we're all still kind of hanging out in the theater, like talking like, oh my God, can you believe when this happened? Or, when this character did that? And so I just had to share that because I think it surprises a lot of people that I enjoy Sex and the City.
That's a great story. And this was in New York City?
Yeah, this was in New York.
Okay, and so they tend to have these later, I guess they do have them here in LA, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't know when they started doing it, but, like Friday used to be the day that movies came out. They used to come out maybe also on like a Wednesday, but Friday used to be the day. The weekend started on Friday. And then they started doing this thing where Thursday night, but it was like midnight. It was like the midnight showing. And then it got earlier and earlier. It'd be like 9:00 and midnight on Thursday. And then 7:00, 9:00 and midnight on Thursday. And now Thursday's just wide open. So, but yeah, this was back when it was the midnight showing only, so.
Why is your writing mentor relationship important to you?
Because you need someone to believe in you. And that's one of the major things that he provides is he lets me know that, he sees me working. He believes that the work is good. He believes that I have a gift, a talent for this. And I think that's important. You need to have someone in your corner, and it's great that he is who he is and he's in the position that he's in. But it can really be anyone, I think, as long as they have that belief and they let you know that what you're doing, is worth it. Like you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting your talent. Keep pushing. That's why it's really important because he provides that for me. And also, I mean, with him being in the business and being successful, he just has a lot of knowledge that he's able to impart. Whether it can be anything from how scripts are formatted and how people will receive the script to stuff on the business end. This is what you need to think about. You need to think about, taxes. You need to think about, contracts, blah, blah. So he's got that kind of inside track. And that's also beneficial. I mean,
Aside from him believing in you and you sort of, showing up for him, whether it's online or in person, what was one or two things that he gave you feedback on that really changed things for you?
Just, I would say my approach to certain genres of storytelling. He read one of my scripts and just the advice. I think this is what you should do in this situation. This is how things are usually structured in this genre, and he knows what he's talking about. And just following his advice, I think really helped improve that script. And I mean, I saw it in things like contest placement and sending it to coverage services and just noticing, you know, the change in score. It's just like, oh, you know, this was helpful. This was a beneficial tip. You know, just things like that. I think what it is that he's geared me to write things that will be accepted by the industry, right? The industry looks for certain things, and he wants to ensure that I'm giving the industry what it wants so that they can say, hey, yeah, you know, we'll take a look at the script. You know, we like this guy, we like your writing. So
Is that a mistake a lot of screenwriters make? Is that they're not writing the right stuff or the right genre for them?
I just think that there's certainly things that are looked for. I think that a lot of emerging screenwriters are hesitant to do so because they don't want to maybe fall into a formula. You know, they don't want to save the cat, you know. But maybe something like that is necessary because that's what's looked for. You know, that element that makes your protagonist likable or interesting. You've got to do something like that. And I just think that I do think that, you know, a lot of emerging screenwriters want to do what they want to do. Like, you know, I'm going to be different. I don't, you know, and it's like, let's give them what they want. And then once you've kind of established yourself, go wild, you know, do whatever you want to do. So that's my belief.
Sure. So if it's like a musician, if you're playing, say, heart and soul on the piano, don't get too jazzy with it or whatever until you've really mastered the song.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
What compels you to write?
I just have stories to tell. I have worlds and characters in my head, and these characters are begging for their stories to get out. And that's what I want to do. I want to help them get their stories out.
And this has been happening since you were 7?
Yeah. When I when I was a kid, I used to create like the Cablevision guides, the schedule guides, right? If you have HBO, they send you the monthly guide to let you know what movies are playing that month and what time on what day. I would create entire guides filled with original ideas, original stories. It was a bit disruptive. Like, it was to the point where teachers would come to my desk and say, "Jay, you can't work on your TV guide like during, you know, math. Like, what are you doing?" But as I said, I would fill these guides with all of these stories that I would create, you know, and they, you know, they're coming from a young kid's mind, you know, so it'd be little things like, you know, Johnny got grounded for not doing his homework, you know, and that'd be the title of the movie, Grounded, you know, and it's showing Saturday at 7 p.m. or whatever. But I think that's where this all stems from, you know, me having just idea upon idea upon idea, because I'm always thinking of a story to tell. What story, you know, should I tell next? Okay, I'm working on this script, but what should come next? Some days ideas just come to me, boom, boom, boom. I don't understand how or why, but it happens. I'm not one of these writers that, oh, you know, I have to write an idea down because I'll forget it. No, I have too many ideas, and I'll never forget. I do, though, have a document that has nothing but ideas. It's like titles and ideas. And I do refer to it every once in a while just to see, you know, what should be the next project? What should I tackle next? And the funny thing is, I will usually come up with an idea that's not on that document that I end up working on. So, you know, all of these ideas are just kind of sitting there.
Do you find these ideas compete with you? Like you're working on one, but then there's this new one and it's competing for your attention?
Always. And I can only work on one project at a time. I can't work on projects simultaneously. Like, my mind doesn't work like that. But the good ideas, they stay in my mind. They don't go away. So, like, when I moved to to Los Angeles, I came out here with 3 specs. Those were ideas that had been rattling around in my head, for far longer than, before I moved out here. And I had ideas when I came out here, and 2 of those ideas I've written since I've been out here. And again, ideas that I had long before the move. The good ideas just don't go away. They're always in my head.
How long did it take you to write those 3 specs?
I'm not sure, but not very long. Once I set out to write a script, I've got the idea, I outline it, and when I have the outline, it's nothing. I mean, I can usually hammer out 5 to 6 pages in a writing session. And, if we're talking a 95, 100-page script, it doesn't take very long at all. So, my most recent script, I started at the beginning of the pandemic. And when everything started happening, I stopped writing. I was kind of frazzled or whatever. But then I picked it up several months later toward the end of the year. And so if I had to how fast, does it take? Like that script probably took about a month and a half.
So when you came out here armed with these 3 spec scripts, you came with the knowledge of, you'd heard so many people that meet with someone and they say, okay, great, what else do you have?
Exactly.
Okay, and you didn't want to be that guy that is like, well, no, this is it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I see.
Exactly. And I mean, that's what's been happening. I have been sending a script out, and the people, that have responded, that's always been their question. It's like, oh, this is great. What else do you have? So yeah, you've got to be prepared. You've got to have something to send them.
And you also write. You have fiction. You have books that you have on Amazon as well. So
right, yeah,
okay.
I do. Yeah, I've got 4 books. Those books were written in that period where I'd kind of fallen out of love with screenwriting, with movies. But I wasn't going to stop writing. Like writing was still going to be, I still wanted to get these stories out. And so that's what happened. And the funny thing is, working on these books, that's what reinvigorated my love for screenwriting. It's just like, let me, get back into this. As a matter of fact, 2 of my books started out as screenplays. And I felt that the stories were better served as novels. Just so that, I just felt that I could get a little deeper with the characters. You can do things in a novel that you can't do in a screenplay or in a film. And I just wanted to explore that. So that's what happened with that. But yeah, I reverse engineered a couple of screenplays into books.
And you wrote these while you were in New York City?
In New York. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And some of these protagonists, they're all women-centered stories?
Not all of them.
No?
Not all of them. But I do tend to write women characters. Like I don't shy away from that if I feel that, this is the protagonist, this is, who the story, needs to be about, then, I'll do that. But my first book, Guestlist, is about a young woman. It's funny because Guestlist is about me leaving Miami and going to New York. But the book itself is about a young woman who makes that move, who leaves Miami and comes to New York. And she gets caught up in the whole party scene. That's what I was escaping from when I left Miami, the whole nightlife party scene.
Right, pretty people, empty promises.
Exactly, yeah.
Some backstabbing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wouldn't know anything about it. Why is mediocrity not an option for you?
It just never has been. I just think that that's something that was instilled in me by my parents. Excel in everything. Put your best foot forward. Extra effort. It doesn't matter like what I do, like what endeavor I pursue. I'm always going to give a little extra because you just have to. You just have to. There's no excuse for not. And it really does kind of, I get disappointed when I maybe read people's work or see, projects that people have done, and you can tell that they didn't put their all into it, right? Um, and and then sometimes, they still get rewarded for it. They're still, praised for it. And it's just like, but come on, you can tell that this person put no effort into, what was done. And we're praising and we're rewarding them. And I don't know, it kind of takes the wind out of my sails sometimes, because it's just like, I see other people, such as myself, who really do put in that effort, who won't settle for mediocrity and, want to give the best and present the best, and are constantly overlooked.
What does mediocrity look like in a screenplay? And why do you think those people are allowed to have a pass?
Why they're allowed to have a pass, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it could be because of relationships, or I mean, I'm not sure. But when you ask me, like, what does it look like from what I've seen, like, I would just say, like, a general sloppiness, a general disregard for the craft, for the form. And you can see it. I've had people give me scripts and they're formatted poorly. The font face is, I don't know, Times New Roman, different sizes, and just all over the place. And I would tell them, I'd like, look, you may have a great story here, but you got to make this presentable. Let's get it to industry standard. You can't look like this. Make sure your margins are correct. You can't. There's software. There's free software that will help you do this. And the people that take the advice, and it's like, okay, you can tell that they're in it. They're serious about this. But then there are some people that are just like, yeah, no, I don't care. I want to do it this way. And it blows my mind. But that to me is an example. If you don't have a respect or a reverence for the form, then I know that you're not taking the story seriously. If you can, this is the bare minimum. I feel that you're not taking the story seriously, right? What do you really know about film? Like, is this the medium that you should be, writing for? Okay, maybe you have a story, but if you can't get this right, or if then maybe you need to tell your story in another form. But yeah, I just feel like you can see it. I mean, I hate to use the word sloppy, but just the sloppiness. I feel that is a sure side of mediocrity, and I've seen it far too often.
So then what font size should they write in?
I mean,
Okay.
I mean, the standard is the Courier font, 12-point font.
Okay.
And I don't really want to get into a whole formatting thing, because I know people feel a certain way about script formatting. But I just feel like it's one of the just basic pillars of screenwriting. You've just got to know the format. There are books upon books upon books, and screenwriting apps, that will help you write your screenplay in the correct format. And if you can't be bothered, if you're calling yourself a screenwriter, even an aspiring screenwriter, and you can't be bothered to learn correct format, then what does that say for, seriously, what does that say for your work? Or what does that say for your plans, in this industry?
Are you a worst case scenario type of person?
I definitely am.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good way to be. What's the worst case scenario for your screenwriting career here in Los Angeles, Jay?
The worst case scenario would would be that I've done all of this for nothing, that I never write anything that gets made, or that gets sold, or that turns into something that people see. My goal is to become a professional screenwriter. That's what I would like to do. And as long as I can write and I'm able to make that, my living, I can make a living as a screenwriter, that's fine. But yeah, if it just never happens for me, that's worst case scenario. I mean, I can't think of anything worse than that. I've read stories and seen interviews with people who say that, they've written and they've made money and nothing's ever been made from what they've written. It's like, oh, I've been commissioned to write this and, rewrite this, and nothing was ever made. Made a lot of money, but nothing was ever made. In a situation like that, I feel that there's always a way to get something made, though. If I'm able to make a living as a screenwriter, but say none of the projects that I've been working on, the studio or the producer, they decide that they don't want to make it, I think then I would just try to make something on my own. I'm still making a living as a screenwriter, but at least then I would have, I think, the ability to then perhaps do something, on my own, even if it's a short film. You see what I'm saying? Because I'm taking care of myself. I'm earning money, doing what I love to do, as my passion, and that gives me then the freedom then to maybe explore over here, to do something else over here. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. Do you think the words "what if" and you stayed in Tennessee, nothing wrong with Tennessee, but or somewhere else, maybe settled down in Miami, and never tried, would be worse?
oh well, sure.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no, no, no. It's just like, okay, if I'm thinking, worst case scenario, I mean, worst case scenario is me pursuing screenwriting and never achieving that goal, never becoming a professional screenwriter. But me staying in Tennessee or New York or Miami, just never pursuing it at all, well, there is no worst case scenario in that scenario because I'm not chasing the dream. That's how I would look at it.
Sure. But if you still had it inside you, but you just, the odds are it won't happen.
No.
Right.
Like, if it's inside me, then I'm gonna go for it.
Sure.
That's with any endeavor that I have. Like, if it's in me to do something, believe me, I'm gonna chase it. I'm gonna.
What does the 90-year-old J Fingers say in a conversation to the J Fingers sitting here now? And this 90-year-old J Fingers never pursued screenwriting, never got out of his comfort zone, never risked being alone, maybe turning down a great night at TGI Fridays. What's that conversation like?
You know what? I think in that conversation, the 90-year-old Jay would probably be proud and say, at least you tried. You gave it a shot. You went out there and you followed your dream, even though that dream perhaps cost you everything. At least you tried. So yeah, I think that 90-year-old Jay would be proud.
Okay. All right. So if we're traveling ahead in time, and he's like consoling the Jay that's here now, or not even consoling, but just giving him praise for going for it and keep going, and you know, I like what you said. You said if it meant you had to make something of your own, even if it was a short, that would be okay. And then just do, you know, polishes or rewrites for other people.
Right.
And that's a lot of people's careers, and I don't think that's a failure. But everybody has their own bar of what, you know,
Right. Right.
what success is. So. Okay.
And just the reason why I mentioned that is because I feel like in those interviews that I've read and seen where people say, you know, this is, you know, yeah, I've had a great career, but you know, nothing was ever made. I don't know. I just don't get that. I feel like the opportunity is there, you know. Just like I said, like a short or you know, something, you know, it may not be the big massive, you know, 4,000 screens, you know, premiere, but it is something. And then I feel like that's why we get into this business, is we want to create and tell stories, you know, especially in film, you know, you want people to see your work. So just feel like the opportunity is there to create something that can be seen.
What is a chaotic neutral?
um, there's this matrix that has, I guess, you know, different personality traits or whatever. And you've got like lawful good, you know, a lawful good person is the person that, you know, will follow, you know, the letter of the law, and, you know, they're a good, nice, good person. And then you've got like, I forget what the opposite is. It's evil, I guess, unlawful evil, where you just whatever. So on this matrix, I feel I fall in chaotic neutral, right? I'm not a goody two shoes, but I'm not an evil person either. You know, I'm me. I fall in the middle as far as that goes. As far as chaotic, I feel like I'm a bit all over the place, you know. I'm into different things. I like different things. I do different things. I sometimes act on the spur of the moment. Sometimes I will turn down an invitation for potato skins and cocktails. And then sometimes I'll show up and you won't expect it. Like, Jay, what are you doing here? You know, so that's that's kind of what I mean by chaotic neutral. I don't know if that's really the definition, but that's how I define it for myself.
What would you say is the personality type of most of the characters you've created? The protagonists?
I would say most of them are a little chaotic, but they would probably fall a little closer to the good side of the matrix. I think most of my protagonists have good hearts, best intentions for people. I think that most of my characters, most of my protagonists, I think they actually do sacrifice for those that they love, those that they care about. Which makes me wonder if I'm projecting a little wish fulfillment onto them, just like, you know, this is who I'd like to be in that respect. But yeah, most of my characters are pretty good people. Yeah.
And where did this personality matrix, where did this come from?
I don't remember. I saw it online somewhere, and you know, people were filling out the quiz to get the results, and I just thought it was funny. I was like, no, I'm chaotic neutral. I already know where I fall on this spectrum.
What is your writing process?
As I mentioned, I have ideas rattling in my head. When I decide that I want to work on something, the first thing that I do is I get a composition notebook, usually like one of those black and white speckled notebooks. And that's a holdover from junior high. My writing teacher, that's what she made us, you know, we had to get the black and white speckled notebook. That's where all of our assignments, you know, we did them in that notebook. So that's just stuck with me to this day. I get a notebook, write the working title on the cover, And on the first page is reserved for the title and character names. I usually start with the protagonist, right? Once I've got that notebook, every idea, every thought that I have about this story goes into that notebook. There's no real rhyme or reason. I don't, aside from the first page, I don't have, say, like a section for dialogue or anything like that. Everything that I've been thinking goes into that notebook. If I go out to have lunch or whatever and something hits me that I think would be perfect, I come back and I put it in that notebook. Once I have kind of like all the notes and everything, I craft my outline. My outlines are not too detailed. They're pretty spare. And this is because once I have the outline, I start writing. The story really, really like develops. It really begins to tell itself. I've got my notes, I've got the outline, I know what's supposed to happen, but it blossoms during the writing process. So I like to, keep things loose. The outline is like, very spare. And I mean, that's pretty much it. I can't write out of order. I'm not one of those writers. I know a lot of people that say, oh, if a scene is hard for you, just write TK and come back to it. I can't do that. I have to work it out in that moment. And if I'm not able to work it out in that moment, then that's where I stop for the day. And when I come back to it the next day or whatever, let's give it another go. And yeah, that's pretty much my process. And I mean, that's for my books as well. All of my books, same thing. Get the notebook, write the characters, throw in whatever notes, outline it, and then write.
And are you reading the new work from the day before? Like, are you going through the entire thing of what you've written, or you're just starting from the scene right about where you're going to start up again?
Yeah, I just start from the scene. The thing is, I know the story. By the time I start writing the actual script, I know the story so well, I don't have to review the previous day's pages or, start from scratch. I don't have to do any of that. I just jump in at the scene and I keep going. And then once the script is finished, then, of course, I go back and I read from the beginning and see. And usually things work out. I mean, there may be some things that I'd have to shift or, whatever. Maybe there's a payoff that, didn't have a setup, and so I may need to include that or whatever. But for the most part, because I know the story so well, I can just jump right in.
And then when you finished the screenplay, do you give it some time before you go in and look at? Okay.
Definitely. It's the old put it in the drawer, don't think about it. I don't even give it to people to read at that point. I just let it sit and get to work on the next idea. And then I pull it out. And, once I pull it out, after some time, that's when I'll give it to readers, because it's kind of fresh for everyone, if that makes sense. So I get the feedback from my readers and, I've given it time, given it some distance, and it's just like, okay. I also find I'm more receptive to getting like feedback and notes because that time has passed and I'm a little bit removed from it, because when you're, I just finished it, it's my baby. If I get notes back right away saying, oh, perhaps you should consider this, it's like, no, how dare you? This is my baby. But with time and, it's like, all right, that makes sense. More receptive to the feedback.
Have you ever given it to someone and you decided that was the wrong person to give it to?
Oh, that happens often. But I find more often than not that happens if I give it to someone who's perhaps not in the industry, someone who's knows nothing about screenwriting, or they're not as invested in storytelling. I like to do that just because I want to get an outsider's perspective. I just want to know what, Joe, the common man, knows, thinks about this script. But yeah, that does happen. That does happen from time to time.
Also, too, so many people consuming films, they're not in the industry.
Right.
And so, in some sense, if it can appeal to the working person in another state, not in the industry.
Right. And that, I mean, yeah, that's a large part of why I do it because, for instance, I sent my buddy Ralph, I sent him a copy of my recent work in progress because I imagine him as the everyman taking his wife to the movies on a Friday night. It's date night. And what do you think of this? So that's exactly why, give it to people who aren't also screenwriters or, in the industry.
Can you explain how you outline a screenplay?
It's not, yeah, sure. I mean, it's not like an in-depth process or anything. I literally write each scene out, just like a line describing each scene, right? I don't even number the scenes. I just draw a star with a circle around it. That's how I know, okay, new scene. And I write what's supposed to happen. And it's usually just like a line or two, because as I mentioned, in the actual writing of the script, the scene blossoms, it comes to life, things happen. So I don't get too detailed. It's just what's supposed to happen. And yeah, I don't aim for a set number of scenes. I know some people, 70 scenes and you have a movie. I think that's David Lynch who said something like that. I'm not an index card person. I never have been. Like, that just doesn't work for me. I just write the scenes down in my notebook and go from there.
Why do you love Save the Cat?
Save the Cat provides structure. And I do like structure. I know, based on what I said, like about the outline, it might not seem like I'm too, but I do like structure. And the thing about Save the Cat, when I read it, it was so funny. I found Save the Cat. This guy was selling books randomly, like on the street. And you see that a lot in New York, at least. Someone will have something set up. And I was walking past and, just looking at what he's selling. He's selling books and CDs and stuff. And I saw Save the Cat. And I'd heard of it, but I hadn't read it. And I asked him, okay, how much, for this book? He's like $1. I remember it's like $1. And I was like, you got a deal. So I give him $1 and I take Save the Cat and I read it. And I understood why it kind of riled some people up. But again, it provides structure. Like, I don't think that you don't have to be beholden to like what it says. You don't have to treat it as gospel, right? You don't have to have a certain event happen on a certain page or whatever, but recognize that these elements are pretty much in every film and, we see in every script that we read. If you're looking to, as I am, write commercial feature films, it's not a bad guide to follow. It's not, and so that's honestly, that's why. And I think it's undeniable. Every film, every story has that moment, that catalyst that shakes up the protagonist's world. Every story has that moment where the character debates as to what they should do. I feel like every story has like that Save the Cat moment. It might not come at the very beginning, but there's that moment that you realize the protagonist more often than not is someone you want to root for. There's always a dark night of the soul. There always is, So yeah, Save the Cat, it laid the structure out for me and it gave me the terms because I didn't know what all these terms, were called, but it lays it out. And I think it's brilliant. And even Sid Field did something similar. I mean, in Screenplay, he's okay, you've got your first, second, and third act, and then you've got your plot point A and your plot point B. And he had page numbers, but you don't have to stick to those page numbers. Just know that those elements should be present. Those elements should be present. You should include them.
We know you love the film Real Genius with Val Kilmer. What is the save the cat moment in that film?
I think it's probably, okay, so with Real Genius, uh, the premise, there's a young genius who enrolls in this sort of like Caltech type school. And he partners up with Chris Knight, who's played by Val Kilmer. And he's young, like this kid is like 14 or 15 years old. You know, he's young. And he's surrounded by all these older students. They're picking on him, whatever. And he places a phone call to his parents, complaining about the school. He's crying, Mom, I don't want to be here. And the call is recorded and broadcast, like I think in the cafeteria. You know, and he's humiliated. This kid is humiliated. And he doesn't know what to do. Val Kilmer says, hey, don't get mad, get even. And he helps him concoct this plan, you know, to get revenge on like the main bully, which is this guy named Kent. It's so funny that this film, everyone at the school is a nerd essentially, but they still have the different factions. You've got
Sure.
your cool kids and you got your bullies or whatever. So the main bully, Kent, they devise this plan to get revenge on him. And they do it by essentially dismantling his car and reassembling it in his dorm room where it's like sitting on this inflatable raft or whatever. It's great. It's great because it works for the world of that film as well. You know, it's so absurd, but it works for the world of that film. You know, Kent, he loves his car and everything. But I think that's the save the cat moment, because that's the moment where you realize that Chris Knight is going to help this kid adjust to life at this school. You know, that's the moment I think you really like him, because he can come off as a bit insufferable in the beginning. Like when we're first introduced to him, he's actually interviewing for a job, and he's wearing alien antenna and bunny slippers, and it was a Halloween costume that I wore one year. Actually, it's fantastic. You see, he just doesn't care. He doesn't care. But when he helps out, you know, the new kid, when he helps the kid get revenge on the bully, that's when you see he does care about something. And I think that's his save the cat moment.
Interesting. So he's always been super smart. He doesn't really have to worry about, he always figures things out.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so then you see sort of this humanity come out of him, helping this other kid that was being bullied. Interesting.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I like that. When you saw the guy on the corner selling Save the Cat, you buy the book, you read it, how has it impacted your work, even to this day?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, that book, Blake Snyder, what he did is he turned a lot of the elements that I think should be in the script, right? For instance, Dark Night of the Soul. It's something that I've seen in just about every movie that I've watched, that I've read, and just about every story. I just didn't know what it was called. I just, you know, didn't have anything to call it, but I knew the moment. So the book turned all of these elements, and that helped me realize, oh, that's what's happening here. That's why it's happening here. This is why we should have this. And so I've been a lot more cognizant of, you know, how I'm using these elements, where I'm placing them in my own scripts, in my own writing, making sure, just being aware of, you know, me using those elements, and, you know, just making sure that they're placed properly in my script. Because you can't have a Dark Night of the Soul at the beginning of, you know, that doesn't work.
And then in Real Genius, what is the Dark Night of the Soul? Is that where the one character calls the parents?
No, I would say the Dark Night of the Soul is when they realize what the professor has done. They learn that their professor is using their work to craft a laser to essentially like assassinate people from space. And they realize, okay, we've solved this issue, and he's taken it, you know, to the government. What can we do? I think that's the Dark Night of the Soul. is because, I mean, even Val Kilmer, his character, Chris Knight, is despondent. He has a mini breakdown, and they kept their solution was to essentially like freeze the laser, and they kept it in the freezer in the break room, and he has a breakdown. He's beating on the refrigerator, and he slumps down like, I can't believe it. He says, I was a fool. But then there's the moment where they realize what they can do in order to sabotage the professor, and that's how they come out of the dark night of the soul.
So how does this professor get them to come up with ideas? He presents this potential laser.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm fuzzy on the details, but he has them working on a laser project. Like they all know it's a laser, and they're trying different methods. Like there was one method I remember that uses a mirror of some sort. But I think if I'm remembering correctly, the problem was that the laser was too hot. Like they couldn't regulate the temperature, and that's where they got the idea to freeze the mechanism that fires the laser. But because, I don't know, because it was so intense or whatever, it was only good for a limited amount of time, maybe like 2 seconds or something like that. Yeah, I'm fuzzy on the science.
I want to see it again. I think I have seen it, but it was a gazillion years ago, and now it'll be part of movie night. I like that. Jay, let's say you were writing a screenplay and you go through it and you say, I'm missing some beats according to Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. What would you do?
I mean, I think it's difficult to miss any of the beats because they're so dependent on each other. For instance, you've got the catalyst, and the catalyst is supposed to be the life-changing event for the protagonist. And then after that is the debate. And the debate is essentially the protagonist deciding on what action they're going to take with regard to the catalyst. And I think because the beats are so dependent on each other, even if you forget about one or two, they're still going to be present in the script. They've got to be. I just think that inherently they're part of the story. You're going to have that dark night of the soul. It just happens in every story, because in every story the protagonist gets defeated. The goal that they're chasing, what they're trying to do, they get thwarted at some point, and they feel low about it. It just happens. So I don't know that you can really leave out a beat or miss a beat. It's there. Even if it's not strong, like, it's there. Perhaps you'll have to go back and think, oh, wait a minute, this is supposed to be, oh, okay, and maybe punch it up. But I think the beats are there. They should be there. Yeah.
Can you explain why screenwriters should not use bold slug lines?
No, I think screenwriters should use bold slug lines. Bold slugs is one of those things. I know I've talked about formatting. Bold slugs is one of those formatting things that really, really, really rile people up, especially on social media, especially like on Twitter. We get into these formatting wars. What's acceptable? Should you bold your slugs, or should you underline them, or should you? I don't know. It's just all sorts of like craziness. Bold slugs, I don't think, are a big deal. I like to use them. I just think that it makes the page look better. Separates, clearly separates different scenes. Aesthetically, it's pleasing to me. But if, you choose not to bold your slugs or underline them, then that's fine. Like, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. I think, and this is to go back to something I said earlier, I think a lot of the formatting wars stem from people wanting to do their own thing instead of adhering to like an established format. People get the advice all the time, don't make your descriptions, your action lines too long. We don't want paragraphs and paragraphs of description. That's not how it's done. But someone will say, pull a page from the Chinatown script and say, but look at this. This is Chinatown, you know, Oscar-winning script and classic film, and, you know, there's paragraphs of you know, action. In my mind, I'm like, well, number one, it was written in the 70s. I'm sure Robert Towne wrote that like 72, 73, because the film came out in 74. Number two, it's Robert Towne. Robert Towne can do that. And also, times have changed. You know, whereas that was the norm. And if you know, look at scripts from like the 70s, yeah, you'll see that they're very like prose heavy and, you know, whatever, but that's what was done. Now, white space is, you know, considered like, that's the good thing, you know, they have like a lot of white space on the page. So keep your description short, you know, your paragraphs, maybe 2 to 3 lines, like whatever. I mean, and these are all guidelines, but the thing is, you can't hold up an Oscar-winning script from the 70s and say, I want to do it this way because, you know, I saw this. No, you know. So I think a lot of like the formatting discussions stem from stuff like that. People see what established writers are doing and feel that they can do the same thing. And everyone says, you know, because it's all about the story. And that's very true. Story is the most important thing, but kind of goes back to what I said earlier. If your work looks sloppy, or if it doesn't look like, in my opinion, you know, if it doesn't look like it's adhering to, you know, proper format, no one's going to get to the story. They're going to look at the script and say, what is going on here? You know, this is not a screenplay.
Why do you think there's more white space on the page than nowadays?
I think more white space just means less words. People don't have the time to like really sit down and read. Like they want to get through a script as fast as possible. And so if there's a lot of white space, I feel that indicates that you're telling the story, you know, using, you know, economy of words, and they can get through the script. Even if, you know, 100-page script, they can get through it in no time. Like I think a great example is Misha Green. She wrote a script called Mother. It's an action script. And like her action lines are very short. Like, I mean, some action lines like 1 or 2 words, you know, and that's it. And the dialogue is also short. So there's lots of white space when you know, flip through it. I can imagine any like development exec or producer like getting that script and flipping through it and being like, oh yeah, I can get through this and still have enough time to make it to Fridays for cocktails and potato skins, you know? So I really think that that's why. Just people want to read and get through it as quickly as possible.
So then when does the heavy dialogue come in? Or it doesn't? We're using less dialogue now?
You know, I've heard from so many people, you know, you don't want to have a lot of dialogue. You don't want chunky blocks of dialogue. You know, you can get away with that if you're Tarantino, but most of us aren't Tarantino, you know, so they say it's best to keep your dialogue, you know, short. So yeah, I don't.
So the prose heavy Woody Allen, Diane Keaton conversations, those, as wonderful as those are, we're not having as much of those now?
Right, I don't think so. And yeah, you know, like I love those movies and I love those sorts of exchanges in film, you know. I think because I think I tend to write a lot of dialogue. So what I do is I break the blocks up using like parentheticals or using short action lines. This way it doesn't look like a big, massive, you know, speech, a big, massive block of dialogue. And I'm giving white space, you know, separating these elements, but also giving white space. So I'm hoping that it's pleasing to, you know, whomever reads it.
Why do screenwriters argue over format?
Because it's the one thing we can control. in this in this crazy industry is how our work looks, you know, how it looks when we present it to someone. And I just think that everyone feels that the way they do things is perhaps the right way to do it. You know, I'm an advocate of proper screenplay format, follow, you know, like I use a program, you know, it works well. There's a book called, I believe it's called The Hollywood Standard, which also, you know, has a lot of tips as far as formatting. I think it's a great kind of formatting guide. You know, I follow that as well. If I'm unsure about something, I always refer to the Hollywood Standard. It's just like, oh, okay, this is how I, you know, because I want any manager or producer or actor or anyone who picks up my script to look at it and say, yes, you know, just by looking at it, like, yes, this is professional work. And then they can read it and get into the story, you know, whatever. We are in control of that. After we write the script, we send it out. That's it. It's out of our control, and so I think that that's a major reason. Is, you know, this is us. This is what we can do. You want to put that out there, and also you don't want to give anyone a reason to pass, to reject your work, and you know, I think that if you give them a screenplay that doesn't look right, I think that will happen.
Right. I remember going to like this ridiculous resume thing that I was supposed to go to, and the guy's like, "Yeah, you want to use these fun fonts, and you want to make your thing really stand out." And I thought, why? Because that's going to just confuse the reader. And it sounds like that's the same thing. Like, I don't want to submit a script that has a fourth of an inch margin all the way around and a cursive font that's a cool, you know, Gaelic looking thing.
Right. And, you know, and that's the thing is that with formatting, you know, I'm not talking about, like, there are people who argue over using a fun font on the title page. I think that that's fine. I've done it, you know, that's cool. But the title page, it's supposed to look a certain way. You know, you have your title, you have your writer's name, and then you've got the information, you know, in the bottom left corner. I think that a fun font, you know, for the title is fine. But as you mentioned, can't be that fun font throughout the entire script. Like, that's not going to work. And so,
Jay, you've brought some examples of your own work here, a script. Can you talk us through how it should look?
I mean, sure. I mean, for instance, talking about like a fun font on the title page, like this is my script, Potter's Field.
Oh, nice.
And I used a font that is supposed to mimic like dripping blood. It's a horror, but it's a horror comedy. So, you know, I wanted to get a little cheeky, so give you that horror vibe, but also a little playful, little fun vibe. So that's why I did that.
Okay, so you did use a cool font for the title page.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe a page like this illustrates what I was talking about.
Right, white on the page. Okay.
Right, you know, short dialogue blocks. The action lines aren't too long, probably like the longest action line. Like it hits like 3 lines here. So, I mean, yeah, and if you'll notice, my slugs are bold and underlined.
Okay.
Just because, again, I like the way that looks and breaks up the scene.
One thing I'm seeing, Jay, is your script here is reading more like a book, and it's less so single page.
Right. I mean, and this is just for me. Like, I printed this out, you know, like this for me. Effort to save paper and, you know. But no,
wonderful.
Definitely, like if I were to print out a script and send it out to someone, definitely it would just, you know, single side printing.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm all about saving paper and laser printer, you know.
Yeah.
All the toner, things like that. Okay, great. So that's an environmentally friendly script right there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then are the pages numbered?
The pages are numbered.
Okay. Where do you have the...
You don't number the first page, but you certainly begin with number 2 on the second page.
Okay, and you're going to have it upper
In
corner,
the
not
upper,
lower.
yeah, upper,
Okay.
upper right corner.
And then toward the end, at the end of the script, how does it end? Just kind of like fade out. There's no
I used fade to black.
fade to black.
I
Okay.
used fade to black, and then I hit him with an actual the end.
Okay.
Stephen King, once again, the sweetest phrase that writers will ever type is like the end. He says something like that, so I always do that. And that's that is another thing though. People are really, they feel strongly about fade in, fade out, fade to black, and I think that those are all stylistic touches. I like to fade to black, so.
Okay. And the end, is it written in all caps, or that doesn't matter?
I don't think that it matters, but I, in all caps and bold and underline, like the slugs.
Are there different screenwriting rules for established screenwriters versus those that are new writers?
I think so. I think that there are unwritten rules. And it just, again, I think a lot of it basically boils down to like formatting, how your script looks, how you present your script. I mean, newbies can't do what established writers can do. I mentioned like the Robert Towne thing, or, I feel like a lot of screenwriters don't use slug lines at all. For me, that's a big thing. I think that's insane, but I know that William Goldman, for instance, doesn't use slug lines. And of course he, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right? But I feel like a William Goldman can get away with that. Jay Fingers cannot. So I'm, very careful in how I format and present my work, so that one day, if I do decide that I want to break a rule here or there, I can.
Do you have an opinion about loglines?
Yes. I do not like log lines. I think log lines suck.
Why? What's wrong with them?
They're just they're difficult. They're difficult. Everyone's just like, oh, if you can, if you're unable to distill, your story into one sentence, you can't tell me in one, maybe 2 sentences what your script is about, then already I know that your script is terrible. And I'm like, no, that's not true. I do understand the importance of log lines. It's just crafting them is just a pain. I just don't like doing it. My log line for Potter's Field, I worked on for weeks before I finally got one that I thought was decent. I can't even say that I was like truly pleased with the final log line, but at a certain point I was just like, okay, I've got to stop. This is where we're at, and I'm gonna see if this works. And it's got me some requests, so obviously I did something right with that.
So the log line for this film, which is Potter's
Field.
Field, okay. It took you how long to come up with it?
Several weeks.
Several weeks?
Several weeks. It took me several weeks to craft this one. But then that's also based on, just working on it previously, just coming up with log lines that just absolutely didn't work, and just me giving up, or, like whatever. So when I finally came back to it, because I knew that I wanted to start getting the script out there, I sat down with this version of the log line, and yeah, it took several weeks for me to craft it and get it into this shape where I'm finally getting some hits from it.
Oh, may we hear it?
Yeah, sure. Sent to a remote island to bury the dead, a wisecracking young inmate soon finds his life in danger when the island is overrun by hordes of the undead, who had been killed by prison guards.
Okay. So, what parts did you struggle with? Like, where did you find you?
Well, first, like mentioning the protagonist, I didn't know how I wanted to describe him. There were some drafts where I used the character's name. His name is Amir Addison. But then I realized no one cares. That's not what they're looking for in a log line. The characters, they'll get to the character's name when they read the script. So in trying to describe, who he was succinctly, that was difficult for me. But then I just thought about the most striking parts of his personality. We already know that he's, in prison, he's an inmate, and he has this kind of caustic sense of humor. He's always, just saying something smart and, not really insulting people, but kind of going there. And so I thought wisecracking would be a good way to describe him. And I also wanted to kind of bring to mind like a young Eddie Murphy. We all kind of remember what Eddie Murphy was like in his early career, with like 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop and Trading Places. And I wanted my character to be reminiscent of that. So I thought that wisecracking was a great way to kind of describe him. Just the structure, just what should I mention first? Should I lead off with a wisecracking young inmate? And I did that for a while, but that didn't seem to work. So then I led off with, assigned to bury the dead on this island. Just it sets up the place, you know where the script is taking place and what's supposed to happen. And then after I set it up, we mentioned the protagonist, wisecracking young inmate. But I think the thing that really made the logline work was at the end, I added the little tidbit about the undead who had been murdered by prison guards. That was missing. And everyone, when I asked for feedback on the logline, they were just like, this is cool, I guess. But, but when I added that one part toward the end, response was, it was just like, oh, wow, now I get it. Now I want to read this. Now it hooks me. So that's the logline that I decided to go out with. And yeah, once I started querying, I started getting hits, started getting requests for the script.
So you were sending it out before you had this particular logline?
No, I wasn't sending it out. No. Just working on the logline so that I could send it out.
I see. Okay, so you weren't able to weigh whether this was an improved version, but you knew from the reaction that this tidbit at the end, where we know like why these people had died, and right, okay,
exactly.
Interesting. Wow. And did anyone say it was too long? It was too short of a logline?
No. I don't know how many words it is exactly, but I know I tried to keep it kind of within the recommended limit, like 35 words, 35 to 40 words, I think is what they say your logline, should be. So I tried to keep it within that.
Now for your books, the description, I know on Amazon when I looked at it, it's much longer,
Oh yeah.
It's like a paragraph or so. Is there something with books where there's the same type of rules for the logline?
No.
It's different, okay.
Yeah. They expect a much longer, in-depth kind of blurb, so that they can put on the back of books, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, press releases, what have you. Yeah, log lines are not really a thing, at least, in my experience, in the publishing kind of like world.
Right, so with scripts, short log line and then a lot of white on the page, kind of like get to the point and don't waste the reader's attention. Sounds like, okay. Do you believe that characters drive plot?
No, I think characters definitely drive plot. It's because what we're showing, what we're telling, we're showing like these characters, like their reaction to what's happening around them, what's happening to them, right? I feel like if you have it the other way around, it's just, so contrived. It's like you want something to happen to a character, and based on who that character is, they respond. And then that response leads to the next action. It leads to the next thing. You don't want to have to just hit certain plot points because it's mandated. I want to have Jim and George fight because the plot demands it. No, they have to fight because there's an actual conflict between these two characters. Jim did something that George didn't like, and because of George's character, he's going to react in, say, a physical way, right? It has to be natural, it has to be organic. So character definitely drives the plot.
Is there one character, whether it's in your screenplays or your books, that you were very precious about, and it was hard for you to let bad things happen to?
Oh, that's all the time. That happens to so many of my characters. Yeah, actually, in Potter's Field, there's a character, and I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want it to be ruined. But I will say there's a character that I held on to for a very long time. I mean, through numerous drafts. This was a character that essentially lived to the end of the script. Just because I thought it was cool and funny, and yeah, I thought it worked. But then I realized that this poor character had to go. And I think that the story works better because of it. So yeah. I mean, but even in like the romantic comedy, I have bad things happen to, characters that but here's the funny thing. I think that the worst things happen to the characters that I love the most. Because I think I want the audience to really feel for those characters. Like those are the characters, you want to come away saying, oh, wow, like that hurt my heart, or I can't believe that happened, to this person. And
Interesting. So if it's not a character that you really are invested in, maybe the stuff that happens is just minor.
I mean, I guess, relatively speaking, you could say that. I mean, I'm invested in all of my characters. I love all of my characters. I mean, there are some that I love more than others, but I mean, I do love all of my characters. And so, I do want that feeling for all of them. I want the audience to care for all of them, even the bad ones. I even give the bad ones, the villains or, the monsters. I even give them moments where it's like, all right, I might not really like that person, but I understand, or I can, some way, empathize with them. So, I mean, Potter's Field, we've got these undead creatures running around, but they're monsters, but you feel for them because you learn what happened to them. You see, so
What advice do you have for writing the antagonist?
they can't be just like cookie cutter, one-dimensional monsters. You got to give them some depth. One of the things, I don't remember where I first heard it, but the antagonist is the protagonist of their own story. They believe that they are the good guy. Even something, Thanos, for instance, with the Avengers. Clearly he's the bad guy. He wants to decimate all life, or half, of all life in the universe. But he believes he's doing something noble. And that's the thing. You have to give your villain these layers. You have to give your antagonist these layers. Make them believe that what they're doing is the right thing, or that they've got, I don't want to say noble reasons, but that they've, in their mind, the reasons for their actions are justified.
In Real Genius, do we see that in this professor?
Huh. Interestingly enough, I think that the professor is he's pretty one-dimensional, to be honest, because his goal is just to sell this laser, this technology to the government. But we do get some layers, like we learn that he hates popcorn. It's a small thing, but it plays out in the end. We also learn that he sleeps with his students. He has a fling with one of his young students. So there are little pieces here and there, but yeah, I don't know that we would root for him. I tell you though, who we would root for in Real Genius that could be considered villainous, which would be Kent, the bully, who's essentially the professor's underling. Like I think he's like the TA or whatever. Ultimately, Kent just wants to be liked. He wants to be accepted by the cool kids, and that comes out. So if we're looking for a villain example in Real Genius, I would say it's him. He's doing all the things that he thinks will make him popular. He'll be liked. He'll also please the professor because he wants to do that. He thinks he's doing all the right things for all the right reasons, And in the end, in a weird kind of way, he gets accepted by our heroes. He's embraced by them, and yeah.
So he's redeemable in some sense, whereas the professor character is just, all we know about him is just he makes horrible choices.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and he feels no remorse for them.
Right.
What mistakes do writers make in writing their characters?
I think that one big mistake is trying to recreate something or recreate a character that they've seen elsewhere, right? It's great to draw inspiration from. As I mentioned, my protagonist in Potter's Field, is inspired by Eddie Murphy, but I wasn't trying to recreate, I wasn't recreating Reggie Hammond from 48 Hours. I was taking elements that I thought worked for that character and seeing how they could work for my character. But I think that a lot of writers try to recreate characters wholesale, and you can't do that. You have to find something unique about your characters. And I think that uniqueness comes from within. You have to, this kind of goes back to why I think I love all of my characters, is because every character that I write has a piece of me. And I know that that's probably cliche, but I mean really have a piece of me. There's always some aspect about these characters that's an aspect of me. And I think that that's what a lot of writers should do, is they need to find those aspects that they can imbue in their characters to make the characters more unique.
So if I'm a writer that's so inspired by a story and I want to make something so similar, it would be better if I just did a fan fiction, maybe story based on this, rather than try to infuse that same kind of character into my own world.
That's the thing. If you're trying to tell an original story, no, create that character. Create that original character. Can be inspired by whatever, but imbue that character with your uniqueness. If you're writing fan fiction, you're trying to play in somebody else's sandbox. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's great, but you're dealing with a world, and you're dealing with characters and relationships and things that have already been established. Even if you create a new, if I'm writing Star Wars fanfic and I create a whole new Jedi character to throw into that fanfic, I'm still dealing with the world that was created by Lucas and that's been shepherded by, so many others. But if you want to create a truly original character, you've got to tell your own story. And I think that in putting yourself in your characters and making your characters unique, that's really telling your story. That's really telling your truth, because this is coming from you as opposed to working within parameters that have already been established. You see what I'm saying?
What questions should a writer be asking themselves about their characters?
What makes their character tick? Why is this character doing what they're doing? When a character, every story is about a character that wants something. Why does that character want it? You think of the opposing forces to getting what you want, why are those the opposing forces that give your character a hard time? Just you've gotta really put yourself in your character's place. Like, what can you do? How can you navigate this world and these obstacles in order to get what you want? This is why I say you have to imbue, like, a portion of you, because this is going to be like, this is you as a writer. You are going on this journey along with your protagonist. You are the protagonist, essentially, right? So what would you do? How can you face these obstacles? How can you face whatever adversaries, come your way, in order to achieve that goal? Why is that goal so important that you would endure, like, all this conflict?
And to remember that the antagonist is the protagonist of their own story.
Of their own story. Yeah.
Right, right. What suggestions do you have for writers developing character?
I would say that writers definitely need to know themselves so that they can dig deep. But also, I would suggest writers pay attention to those around them. Whereas, I like to give my characters characteristics of me, I also draw inspiration from people I've met, my friends, my family, and I think that that's really important, because when you pay attention to other people, you just kind of pick up on everything about them, from the way they speak, the way they carry themselves, like their posture or whatever. Even little decisions will inform you, tell you so much about a person, whether they take sugar in their coffee or not, which then, it can lead you down a rabbit hole. It's just like, well, why doesn't she take sugar in her coffee? That's an interesting choice, and you can just go so many places. But I think that paying attention to other people is really key to developing a wide variety of characters.
Do you find that something when you're out in the world that you are constantly sort of observing, just to see from a character's perspective, not necessarily like judging someone, but just sinking in how someone's approaching the barista and asking, maybe they're whispering for their order and we don't know why they're whispering.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's a great example, because that's a choice. That's a choice that person made, was to whisper to the barista, as opposed to, just loudly, yes, I would like a Fente, whatever.
Right.
And those choices inform character. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Sure, I'm always intrigued by people that are really picky about their orders, and they're very like specific, and they seem very concerned. And I remember we went to some place where the man wanted to watch them cut up the pizza at one of these pizza, and I know this seems trivial, but to me it spoke volumes about who this guy was, and they weren't cutting it up right, and he was upset. This was just one of these made to order. So you just then wonder, what is his life like outside of that pizza place?
Exactly.
If he was so concerned with the way they were cutting the pizza, and this is one of these made to order places. It's not even like, people, it's quick, fast, and so just watching little interactions like that.
Yeah.
Why do you have a love for writing female protagonists?
I really just have to attribute that to growing up with strong women in my life. It's my mother, my stepmother, my sisters, cousins, and friends. I've always been surrounded by strong women, and women who I don't think that their stories have been told. And it's really interesting, because I sometimes struggle with this, in that, should I be the one to tell these stories because I'm a man? But I think back to a conversation I had with a friend, and she really wowed me when she said this. And what she said was, she was just like, "You like women," and I'm just like, "Well, yeah, I'm a straight guy. I like women." She was just like, "No, I don't mean like in a romantic sense or in a sexual sense. I mean you like women. You pay attention. You're like empathetic. Like you really truly care about women." And when she said that, like I said, like it really stuck with me. And I thought back to like the books that I've written, the scripts that I've written, and how I've treated my female characters, and I've tried my best to, yeah, tell the stories of these women, and try to uplift these characters so that should anything ever be made, whoever sees this, perhaps they'll see themselves in that character, and they'll feel, they'll get that message. They'll feel empowered, and they'll feel uplifted. So it's really just due to the women in my life. I mean, I've just had amazing women in my life, and they inspire me. They truly do inspire me.
Well, let's see you had brought some of your books with you here?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just, because I read a little bit about them on Amazon, and each one had an interesting story. I was just wondering if you could hold it up and just quickly tell us.
Sure. So this is Guestlist.
Okay.
This is my first book, and it tells the story of a young woman, named Juliet, who moves from Miami to New York. When she gets to New York, she gets caught up in the whole nightlife scene, meets a popular party promoter, and sparks fly.
Okay.
Yeah, the reception to this book was really good. I was worried because of what we were talking about. I was worried about how people would respond to the depiction of Juliet. I wondered if this was the story that I should tell because I was telling it from a young woman's point of view. But apparently, people responded. The voice was authentic, and so I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with it.
That's a really cool cover too. I like that.
Thank you, thank you. It was actually designed by a very talented friend of mine, Sheena Michelle Reese, Civilized Media. She designed. This is actually the second cover for Guestlist. The initial cover was in a nightclub and had the disco ball and everything, but I wanted Juliet to be on the cover, and so.
What were you afraid of with that character, that the audience may either think you weren't the right person to write it or whatever it was?
Well, again, just I'm a man writing, about a young woman and writing, through her point of view, and it's a romance, and the book goes certain places, especially like sexually, and I I was worried that it would come off as inauthentic. I was worried that maybe I know I've seen gripes of like male writers, writing their fantasy, writing, and oh gosh, there was a hilarious example I saw on Twitter where it was, I don't know, something like a woman's lips were as big as, I don't know, big as balloons, or, it was just something so odd that clearly the author thought was alluring, and that everyone else is just like, this is terrible, this is horrible. Men, stop writing women like this. And so that's what I was, one of the things I was afraid of. I was afraid that, people would think that, I'm just writing my fantasy, that I may be objectifying women in some way. And that clearly wasn't my intent. This is a story that I felt needed to be told.
Sure, sure. And let's see some of the other ones you got there.
This is Manhattan Sweetheart.
Nice.
I Forgive me, I forget the illustrator's name, but she's like a fashion illustrator, a Russian fashion illustrator.
Very
And she gave me so many different options for the cover. But it's great. But Manhattan Sweetheart is about, it's actually about a young man who pursues a young woman. And, he's trying his best. She's essentially revealed to be a call girl. And he just comes to realize, he can't compete with the world that she's in and the things that she wants and what she's after. Again, this was another book that, I was worried about how people would respond, what people would think, but I wasn't trying to, in any way objectify or disrespect, or anything like that. It was just a story that I wanted to tell. And it's also inspired by Breakfast at Tiffany's. I love Breakfast at Tiffany's, both the book and the film. And this is just kind of like my spin on Breakfast at Tiffany's. It was just something that I felt I needed to write at the time.
Do you almost hear the critics in your head and then you counteract them?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't think about criticism until after the work is done. And not even after the work is done, but after the work is done and it's out there. I didn't have any kind of thoughts, in writing Manhattan Sweetheart or Guestlist until they were published and they were out in the world. And then it was just like, wait a minute. Should I have done that? Was that, the right story? Should I have included maybe that plot point or whatever? But yeah, apparently I'm okay.
That's good, yeah. Mm. And you have one more there?
I do. I mentioned earlier I grew up in a neighborhood called Orange Mound in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Orange Mound, the novel.
Oh, wow, okay. Very cool.
Thank you. This was young Earl Grey did the cover. She's an Australian artist, and I just loved her style. And she was able to create this. It's supposed to kind of evoke blaxploitation. I don't know that it does, but it's also got a comic booky quality that I love. And the story is it's a thriller. It's it's got action elements and everything, but it's also very much exaggerated, like a comic book would be. So I think that the cover really works for the story. And it tells a tale of, this is actually another male protagonist. It tells a tale of an aunt who's trying to leave the drug dealing game behind. And he gets wrapped up in a romantic entanglement with a hairstylist named Tuffy. But then he suspects that when Tuffy disappears, he suspects that Tuffy has stolen his money. Oh. And a lot of other elements come together. The real bad guys come into play, and I do have Gigi Garcia. She's very prominent on the cover. She's the main enforcer for the bad guys, and she's a strong female character, but she's also very lethal. I've had people who've read this book. I've had a lot of them comment on Gigi, they love her because of her character. She's very much chaotic evil.
What advice do you have for writing female protagonists?
Once again, it's paying attention. I think that a large reason why I'm able to write female protagonists, I guess, as well as I do, is because I really have paid attention to the women in my life. I pay attention to the women around me. I pay attention to, the situations that they may find themselves in and how they respond, or how they would have liked to have responded. It's really just all about paying attention and figuring out how to take what you've seen and give that to your characters.
Sure. And maybe, when you talked about so many male writers possibly are perceived as writing this fantasy, but if you're writing where the women have these fears and doubts and insecurities and things, I don't know where that plays into a fantasy. That sounds like a real person.
I mean, yeah. You know, I'm not. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not coming at my female characters, you know, from that fantasy standpoint. You know, like I'm not like I am creating a person, you know, and telling that person's story. And you've got to really know that person inside and out. You know, their hopes, their fears. You know, how they would react in a certain situation, like who they are. You really have to know who your character is. And I think that if you're able to do that, you can avoid making those types of mistakes.
Sure, and the reverse could be said for women writing men, that if you're just writing this one-dimensional stud hero that's just they never have any doubt. I mean, that doesn't seem real either.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, the same could be said, because, you know, there's a lot of course, criticism. Well, how can we write someone that we aren't really in that situation? Well, I mean, we've met people and we can pick up on things, and yeah, I don't feel like we should be barred from writing things that aren't in our gender or neighborhood or whatever. So,
right, exactly.
Yeah. What challenges do you face when writing female protagonists?
It would really be just like the small things. You know, just for example, gosh, I feel like I'm going to say something horrible here, but
oh, that's okay. We can take it out.
You know, while I'm all about, you know, paying attention and looking at the details, I mean, there are some things I just don't know. You know, for example, Tuffy, who's a hairstylist. I grew up around women who were, you know, in that world, you know, who were hairstylists. My stepmother owned a beauty salon, but I am not a hairstylist. And so it's just like, you know, small details about, say, like women's hair, you know, I want to know, am I getting this right? You know, like it sounds crazy, silly, but those are the challenges, you know, just kind of like the minutia of women's life. You know, I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't know that. So that's what's difficult. And that's when, you know, those are the questions I would ask in writing. It's just like, okay, I have, you know, this female character doing this, saying this, pondering this. Am I getting it right? You know, is this accurate? You know, I will ask for feedback on that, and based on that, apply that, you know, make whatever changes are necessary. Just to go back to your point, you know, we're all people. We all have similar experiences and feelings, you know, regardless of where we may have grown up or you know, where we work or who we interact with. I don't think it's difficult to write female characters, difficult to write women, because women are human. You know, it's really just kind of applying like that same humanity that I would to a male character. It's like, it's not difficult. There's a quote from Jack Nicholson in As Good as It Gets, where someone asks him, you know, how do you write female?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And what does he say? He says, I take away accountability. I think of a man
or something, yeah. Right.
And I take away accountability. I don't know. I always think about that quote. It's just like so horrible. But
it works for his character.
It works for his character, definitely. But yeah, when it comes to crafting female characters, you know, it's not like, you know, it's thinking about them as a human, as a person. You know, we all go through it. We all, you know, have similar stuff going on. So it's the depth, you know, that's not difficult. It's like I said, it's just like the kind of maybe superficial stuff.
Sure, and one thing that I love Margaret Atwood says about female characters is that she doesn't make them all sweetness and light, because all human beings have a range of emotions in them, right. even the best ones. Right. So she gives them good qualities as well as the bad. So I think that's another thing that she said was she saw that, you know, sometimes women didn't have these depths to them that weren't dark enough, you know, in terms of certain thoughts that, you know, weren't always good, you know. I think she said some woman stood up in the audience and said, we're tired of being painted as good all the time, you know. And you know, I'm sure in this beauty shop, you know, people confide in hairstylists, and there's all sorts of interesting stuff in there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
To be continued. What do you hate seeing in female characters?
I hate seeing like the kind of one-dimensional damsel in distress, or you know, just kind of like, you know, dainty. You know, women have range. You know, women, you know, have dark as well as light. You know, as you mentioned in my book Orange Mound, the character of Gigi Garcia. I don't think that I've ever seen a female character like this, like in film or literature. I take that back. I take that back. There's a book called, I think, Heartsick, and the antagonist is essentially like a female Hannibal Lecter, Gretchen something, I can't remember, but you know, reading a character, you know, like that, seeing a character like that in that book, you wouldn't expect. You know, we've never seen anything like that, and I tried to do something like that with my character Gigi Garcia. You know, I think that's probably why a lot of people responded to this character, because she is strong. You know, she's, you know, physically strong. You know, she takes on the guys, but she's, you know, super intelligent. You know, I wanted to create a formidable villain, and I don't think that you know had really been seen. And so so that's the thing. You know, I as you mentioned, like, women have range, and I hate seeing female characters that don't take full advantage of that. That's my roundabout way of getting there, of saying that, is that I don't like when, you know, these female characters are certainly capable of showing and expressing so much more than the writer has allowed them to, and they get stuck in a role that honestly serves a plot instead of the other way around.
You made a video on your J Fingers YouTube channel entitled Why My Latest Screenplay Rejection is Actually a Good Thing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So that was when I had first started querying. I was sitting out Potter's Field, actually. And in setting that out, you know, I was just nervous. You know, this was going out with the log line, you know, the script that I'd worked on for a very long time. I put my heart and soul into. I was really nervous about the type of reception that I would get. And so I was pleased to get a response from a manager. And that response was a rejection. But the thing about it was, it made me realize that, okay, the log line worked, because he read the email, and he read the log line, and in his response referenced, you know, the script, and, you know, explained why it wasn't for him. The other thing was that, well, my name, you know, as we've, you know, talked about, you know, it's memorable. And even though he passed on the script, my name is now like on his mind. It might be in the back of his mind, but, you know, it's seen it. It's come across, you know, his screen. He knows who J Fingers is. I'm very sure that if he sees my name again, he'll think back, because it's an easy name to remember. So I'm sure that he'll think back on that. So that's why I took that rejection as a positive thing. You know, you got to take the positives from you know, the rejections, and everything that could be, you know, perceived as negative. That's why I was really happy with that. It's just like, okay, I'm doing something right. Let me adjust, but still stay on this same path.
Have you always looked at things like that, or is this a new J Fingers?
I've always tried to look at the positive. It gets difficult sometimes, but I do always try to remain positive. You know, sometimes it takes time for me to realize that, oh, okay, that was a positive. I shouldn't have been upset about that, because things worked out in a completely different way, or I was shielded from something that would have been, you know, even more disastrous. So, I'm working on that. I'm working on trying to remain positive in all things.
Why do you believe you can sell a screenplay?
Simply because I can. I honestly believe that, you know, I've got the talent. I honestly believe that I've got the work ethic. I think that I'm the type of person that people would want to work with. You know, they say that that's a very, very big thing. You know, people would rather work with an okay writer who's a joy to be around, as opposed to, you know, like a stellar writer that's a pain in the ass. I feel that I would like to think that I'm a joy to be around. So there's that. But I just believe I can do it. I believe I can do it. And I've seen, you know, so many people succeed. You know, I just feel that the opportunity is there for so many of us. Like it's there for so many of us. So I count myself in that among that number.
And with the 3 books that you held up previously that are on Amazon, how long did it take you to complete each one of those?
I would say maybe about a year and a half.
Oh, for each one? Okay.
Yeah. Because, you know, it's the outlining and it's the actual writing. 2 of those books were actually screenplays that I kind of reverse engineered into novels. So that also took some time, because you can't just transcribe, you know, the screenplay into the novel. That doesn't work like that. But so yeah, I would say about a year and a half for each project.
So you have follow through and you stay with something, and you sounds like you don't give up. I mean, now you have how many feature scripts completed?
Oh wow. I've written, to be honest with you, I've written so many features I've lost count. This is from high school until now. I wrote my first feature and it wasn't good, you know, but I wrote my first feature when I was a senior in high school. And by the time I got to college, I'd written my second feature. And then in college, screenwriting was my concentration. So I, you know, hammered out several features in college. So I really can't tell you how many I've lost count, to be honest. And I'm talking about completed features. I'm not talking about, you know, anything that may have been abandoned. Um, but in moving out here, I decided to like start over. And so I've written 5 features in the time that I decided to move out here to now. So I came out here with 3, and I've written 2 since I've been here.
What does that mean, start over?
I don't think that the work that I'd written prior to my moving out here was up to par. Not to say it was bad. I just think that I've improved. I personally think that I've improved so much as a screenwriter that previous work would have to be heavily rewritten before I showed it to anyone. Whereas the scripts that I came out here with and that I've written since, I strongly believe in.
What would cause you to abandon a screenplay in the middle of it, toward the end?
If it's not working, then I would, you know, get rid of it. If I just didn't, you know, feel it, if there was no joy, because I think that the joy of writing comes across. One of the managers I spoke with that's read Potter's Field, he told me he thought it was a lot of fun. And the reason, you know, he thought it was fun is it read. He could tell that I was having fun writing it. So if I lose that, then I'd probably abandon the script. But that hasn't happened often. I do remember one time abandoning a script, and it was just my fault because I didn't really plot the story. I mean, like the story was outlined, full story. Like even to this day, it's in my head, and I, you know, but it wasn't fun to write, and it just the story wasn't there, you know. So it was time to let it go. I think I stopped writing it like 70 pages in, but it was I
Oh,
had to
wow.
let it go. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so it just felt like something wasn't catching.
Right.
Oh, it's almost like you're putting the car in first and then you're gonna put it in second, and it's not, the clutch isn't, it's not working.
It's not, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You had a video for your J Fingers YouTube channel on late bloomers, and one thing I found interesting was a comment that was underneath the video, and that was someone put that age 35 was a sweet spot for screenwriters. Thought that was interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw that comment and I kind of agreed with it. You know, I, I I felt that if I'd continued, you know, on my, you know, trajectory, had I not taken like that little break or whatever, or had I like maybe moved out to LA sooner, that I probably would have found success at around 35. So I agreed with that sentiment, and I think I think there's some truth to that, you know, because when you're in your 20s, you know, you're young and dumb. You know, I was, you know, I certainly thought that, oh, this is, you know, this is going to happen, and this is, and of course things don't turn out that way. But by the time you reach your 30s, you've got a certain amount of life experience that I think that life experience is absolutely necessary, you know, for screenwriting. And I think that you've got the necessary life experience by that point. And it's right before I think the industry starts to look at you in a certain way, because I mean, if we're going to be honest, ageism is a thing, and I know that there are successful screenwriters, you know, who in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. But I do think that that people may look at an emerging screenwriter of a certain age, you know, kind of like, why? You know, why has it taken you this long? It could be for any variety of reasons. You know, I certainly know screenwriters who decided that they didn't want to pursue screenwriting until they were in their 50s. And that's fantastic. You know, if they've got the talent and the drive, and, you know, they can certainly succeed. But I do think that there's a bit of ageism, you know, that comes into play. So 35 is definitely the sweet spot. It's before you get looked at, but after you've got the life experience and you know what you're doing.
When did you start feeling that writing screenplays wasn't enough to advance your career?
It's really, that's a recent feeling. Yeah, because for a long time I thought that that's all I had to do, just write a screenplay, and then that's it. You know, everyone's coming to me. You know, I've got the gold, right? So yeah, I've really though just come to realize that I've probably got to do more. That may entail like making a short film, which is something that I'm thinking of doing. But yeah, I just have to find other ways to just kind of stand out, get my work out there. I've got to figure it out. Yeah.
What new strategies are you thinking of for moving your screenwriting career forward? You talked about possibly doing a short film.
Right, right. Which for me, that's the biggest thing. Simply because it will showcase my writing, but it's also something that, you know, people can see. You know, I think a short film, I think that people are a lot more receptive to watching a 10-minute short film than they are sitting down with a 100-page screenplay. And I just think that, you know, that can, something like a short film can get my strengths as a writer across, you know, with dialogue and character development, all those things. Aside from that, you know, just really trying to network, you know, just make sure that I'm out there, to build community, you know, speak with people. I think that's really the important thing, is to really just kind of like build that community. because this is a business that's built on relationships. And, if someone knows someone that can help, then maybe a connection can be made, and I don't mean that in like a selfish way, I'm not just trying to make friends just to, break in, but that's just the way the world works. And I've always been like that. I've always been the type of person to connect and help whenever I can. So I just need to, I feel I just need to ramp that up a little more as far as screenwriting in film is concerned.
Do you think at some point it's wise, though, to fly the coop? I mean, groups are great, and it's wonderful to have supportive people, and it is a business of relationships, but then at some point to just know that it's the engine of Jay that has to get this out?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel that the group is great so that, we have that base and we have that community. But I also think that the expectation is that we will fly off, into, our own directions and create our own paths. I mean, it'd be awesome if someone in the group, is able to, turn around and reach back and pull someone up. I would love to, help someone out in the group if I ever can. But like I said, I think that it is expected for us to kind of go out and do our own thing.
With your mentor, Jay, are there things that he's been teaching you about the business, not just craft, that have been helpful to you?
Yeah, the biggest thing is to just be aware of the business of the business. To ensure that you've got a great team in place. You're going to want your manager and agent or agent, but you're also going to want to have a great accountant. You're going to want to have, a great attorney, and an attorney that knows entertainment law. You just make sure that you understand the contracts, the deals that you're signing into. You don't have to, because legalese is a whole other language of its own. So, you don't have to know like the entire 50-page contract or whatever, but at least understand what it entails, what people are expecting, of you. What are your expectations? Make sure that they're laid out and make sure that, your wants are covered as well. So those have been the biggest things.
How often this might happen to a new writer, where something else is in the zeitgeist at the same time, gets made, and there's a feeling of, what if that was my script?
I mean, I honestly don't know really that happens often. Uh, I always hear that it's cheaper to just buy the script, than to steal the idea or steal the script, because litigation and this, that, and the other. So yeah, I mean, I honestly don't hear very many stories at all of screenplays being stolen or ideas being stolen. It's just one of those things that happens. I do believe I saw a video, Film Courage video. Oh, I can't remember the filmmaker's name, but he did say that he had an experience where his script was stolen, and he talked about what he would have done differently. But I honestly feel, just based on what I've heard and everything, I just honestly feel that that's not that commonplace. Maybe that's just my naivete, coming to the fore. But yeah, I honestly don't have a fear of stolen ideas or screenplays.
Jay, you also mentioned on your YouTube channel that there was an article on Final Draft, and it was quite beneficial for you. It was from an Oakland screenwriter who used to be a rapper, I guess, Saeed Crumpler.
Right, yeah.
And it was called Against All Odds, How a Black Writer from the Bay Area Queried His Way to Being Repped. Mm-hmm. Again, that's Saeed Crumpler. So he had some tips, and it was beautifully written. Do you want to go over any of them? Or
Yeah. Saeed's article was very, very helpful. And, following his tips is what has led to the requests that I've gotten so far for my script. One of the things that he said, which I hesitated in doing, but he's just like, use every tool in your toolkit. Like, you've got to, go for it. Just like, mention that you're a Black writer, or mention, if you are a queer writer, or, a Latino writer, or what have you. Use that to your advantage. Mention, if you're a woman writer, because managers are looking to diversify their roster. So it just makes sense, lead with something like that. And it's just like, okay, let me see what this person may have to offer. Another tip was just to keep it short. Queries that I had drafted before reading this article were way too long, way too long. Paragraphs upon paragraphs. It's just like, this isn't good. I'm sitting here thinking that, all right, a 5 or 6 paragraph query is cool. And it's not, so it's just like intro, logline, outro. Thank you, with your contact information, of course. And I followed that template as well. So it's, quick intro, hi, I'm an emerging Black screenwriter, and I've got a script that I think you'd like to read. Here's the log line. Thank you for your time and consideration. J-fingers, phone number, email address. Like, seriously, like, keep it short. And again, it's been something that I think works. I know that these people, their time is limited. They're getting a query, they're getting an email from someone that's unfamiliar to them, and they want to be out of that email as soon as possible. So if you can accommodate them, then I think they'll be more receptive to saying, okay, yeah, sure. You got to have a strong log line. That was another thing. Make sure your log line is tight. And, he did give tips on ensuring that the log line works. And those were tips that I applied to my log line, like the restructuring and finding that one tidbit that would like capture someone's attention. And yeah, like I said, I think it works because I've gotten several requests for my script.
I think Saeed also said number 2, make it personal. Don't just put dear manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes without saying. You definitely want to make it personable, not your, hi sir, hi ma'am, dear manager. And, another thing, even something as simple as hi or hey, if you, use a manager, hey Karen, seriously, it works. Mm-hmm. It really works because it establishes that rapport right away, right away. So.
Right. Yeah. Those are great tips. Yeah. Great. And we'll put a link to that. And then we'll also put a link to your video too, because you talked about it on your channel. Cool. How many query letters have you sent out since you've been in LA?
Gosh, I've probably sent out between 20 and 25, I'll say. Yeah.
And these are emails or US mail?
Yeah, these are emails.
Emails, okay. Mm-hmm. So we don't do
I haven't done the snail mail thing. There is a manager out there who I think prefers snail mail. But I haven't queried that manager. But
okay.
Yeah, sending out emails.
So you've done about, you said 20?
About 20 to 25, probably closer to 20, yeah.
And you definitely got the one response back. Any others besides that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably gotten about 8 responses. Yeah, probably about 8 responses.
When you get these responses back, do you put these in, let's say, an Excel document where to follow up with this person in a year or whenever?
Right. Yeah, so I do have a spreadsheet, and I've got the manager's name, the company that they work for, their email address, the type of manager that they are. Like if they specialize in like TV, or features, because features is really my thing. So I'm kind of focused on that. But there may be some managers who, diversify. They're looking for kind of everything. So I do note that. I do have the date that I query, a follow-up date, and just like a little space to note, what kind of response, if any.
And what do you think is the acceptable amount of time to send out a new query letter with a new project?
I'm honestly not sure, because this is the first, like, query, like, round of querying that I'm doing, and I don't want to follow up with a new project so soon, like after like a pass or what have you. Like one manager, they were just like, this project isn't for us, but feel free to reach out to us with anything else you may have. I didn't know, I mean, I just knew that meant the door was open to query again, but I didn't know if that meant next week or give them some time. So, I want to give some time before I do that. As far as like follow-ups, I'm thinking that maybe like 2 months is a good window. So with that in mind, if I'm just going to query, like, pitch like a whole new script or what have you, then I'd probably extend the wait time to maybe like 6 months.
And is that something that's beneficial, I guess, with your writers group, is you can talk to these other writers and find out what is industry protocol?
Definitely. Yeah. And not just with them, but with other writers that I know, the screenwriting Twitter community,
Well, that's true.
So yeah.
Right. Because I would imagine it does hurt if you're too insistent.
Yeah. I think it could come across as maybe seeming desperate, and that's not, my goal is not to, aggravate anyone. I want to build a meaningful relationship and, build a nice rapport with people. So if the door is left open to, maybe query, with another project, okay, cool. I'm going to give you some time though, before I bother you again.
What are your thoughts on query letters?
To be honest, I'm still not a fan, but I do understand, and now that I understand, and now that I feel comfortable in crafting query letters, I feel like that's a tool in my toolkit that I can definitely use. They're not as bad as Loglines, but no, query letters, I questioned the effectiveness of them before, but that's only because my attempts were just terrible. Like I said, now that I feel that I can craft a good query letter and get a response, I certainly understand why they work.
Well, I mean, because someone wouldn't send their work blind without something on top. It's just like you probably wouldn't want to send a resume without some type of cover letter.
Right, exactly.
Have you submitted all of your scripts to screenplay competitions?
I have not, no. I've submitted only two, now that I think about it. I've submitted a couple of scripts to the Nichols Fellowship, and I guess I can't even remember all the other competitions. Just this was the year that I decided to, finally submit to contests. I know I did some for like TSL, the Script Lab. There are some other competitions, but Nickel is the one that I pretty much focused on. I think the one that everyone focuses on. So, but yeah, I've only submitted to a few, and I've only submitted 2 screenplays to contests.
Did you get feedback?
I did. I got feedback from Nichols. They told me that my script, Potter's Field, placed in the top 15% of all entries, but it still fell short of advancing to I think it was the quarterfinals, semifinals or quarterfinals. I always get them mixed up, but it fell short of advancing. But they did, mention its placement, and so that made me feel pretty good. With some of the other contests, I've gotten feedback about like the script itself, just noting like what the strengths were. A lot of times, dialogue, characters were cited as strengths, so that made me feel good, but also alerted me to what I perhaps need to work on. Perhaps I need to work on story a little more, making it bigger. I think that that's something that is looked for as a big idea. So that's something that I think I need to work on. That the contest kind of the feedback from the contest let me know.
So you think it was worth the submission fee to get this feedback?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I didn't enter the contest honestly, with the belief that, oh, I'm going to win the grand prize and all that comes with that. It was mostly for the feedback.
How have these contests helped improve your writing?
I would say the feedback that I've gotten from the contest have helped me because I can take a look at what's what I need to work on. But I mean that's pretty much it. I'm not a big fan of screenwriting contests. Mostly because I feel there are only so many that can really help a screenwriter. Nickel is one of them. I believe there's an Austin, like the Austin Film Festival screenplay competition, and I think Page and maybe Final Draft, right? But there's so many contests now. Like that's what's crazy to me. Every day on Twitter, you see people tweet, "Oh, waiting on results from this contest, from this competition," and you see like the people, and they should be proud of themselves for advancing. They're tweeting out, "Oh, my script, advanced. This is great. Congratulations to all of the semifinalists, quarterfinalists." And I think that that's great because it's validation. It lets you know that you are doing something right. But as far as what it can do for a person's career, what a contest placement can do for a person's career, I don't, I haven't really seen that. So I don't know that contests are beneficial in that respect.
How many books have you written?
I've written 4 books. The 3 that I brought with me today, and a 4th one, which is a much smaller story. It's called Kisses for Tati. It's like a family drama, young woman who just lives under the thumb of her older domineering sister, and she ends up meeting a guy, and she hopes that this guy can be the beginning of something, a relationship or something that can just kind of get her out of this rut that she's in, kind of free her almost. So it's a very small story, very short story. Gosh, I don't even think it's like 100 pages, but that's the 4th book. It's also my most polarizing. People either love it or hate it because of the ending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it sort of was it Whatever Happened to Baby Jane type of film? Okay. Okay.
Kind of.
Has anyone approached you on wanting to turn one of these books into a film?
No, no one has. But I mean, I have heard some people describe a couple of them as cinematic. But for me, that makes sense considering that a couple of them were began life as screenplays that I adapted, into novel form. But no one has approached me as of yet. But we shall see. I always like to tell managers when I talk to them that I do come with IP. I've got it. So if you're looking to adapt something, I've got some projects for you.
We've been hearing a lot lately that aspiring screenwriters should possibly write a book before they write a screenplay. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's a good idea. That's actually something that my father told me before I went to college. He was just like, you should write the book, and then once the book is published, you should write the screenplay. And I resisted that. I don't know why. I don't know why I felt that writing the screenplay, instead of writing the book first and then adapting it. I don't know why I felt that was like more authentic or pure, but that's where my head was at then. But now I would absolutely say, yeah, sure, write the book. Write the book. If it does well, that's great. get some name recognition. Writing and publishing a book, it certainly establishes you as a writer. I mean, that's something that you can carry with you. People are certainly just like you. They still ask me, when's the next book coming out? Even though I've said time and time again, I'm actually focusing on screenwriting right now. The next book, who knows? But I think it's definitely a good move. I look at nowadays, authors are doing that. Authors are writing the novels and then they are adapting the novels, as opposed to, another writer. Like I look at someone like Gillian Flynn. She did that, with Gone Girl. And now she's actually writing, screenplays, not adaptations, but, her own. So I think that that's great. So yeah, it's definitely a good move.
Do you think novel writing is easier than screenplays because of the format?
No. It's just different. It's just a different discipline. Writing itself is difficult. Coming up with the story and the characters, developing the characters and everything, it's all hard work. And I really don't think that one is easier than the other. Perhaps screenwriting might take a little less time simply because the format is the format. You know what you have to create, and you have these parameters. Please don't try to go above 110 pages or 120 pages, what have you. Whereas with a novel, you can expound and you can embellish and you can write as much as you want. But they're just different disciplines. I don't think one is more difficult than the other.
Jay, you just mentioned IP. You come with IP and you can tell that to a manager or agent. How important is that for a screenwriter?
Well, and when I said it, I kind of said it jokingly, but also, a little serious. But I do think that it's helpful. We're living in an era where everyone wants to turn everything into a franchise, which, I mean, I guess can be cool. But I feel that if you come to a manager or a producer or someone and you say that I've got something that's already established, right? It's already in a way been vetted. It's got a fan base of some sort. That may make it a bit easier for you. You've come with something that has a track record of success. It's like, oh, okay, this book, has sold relatively well, or, this comic book is critically acclaimed. You created that? Oh, okay. So I think that can help a writer in a lot of respects. So if you've got the IP, if you've got whatever it is, whether it's a book, comic book, if you're coming with, I don't know, stage play, or maybe if you've created like a small line of toys that you can craft a story around, anything like that, yeah, I certainly think that helps.
Have you thought about crafting an original trilogy to any of your works, whether screenplay, novels?
I haven't, and it's because I'm really not a big fan of sequels. There are exceptions to everything, of course. Like I love the Marvel movies. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love that kind of serial storytelling because it reminds me of the comic books. I was into the comic books. But I don't think that everything necessarily needs a sequel or needs to be, created, turned into a trilogy. Having said that, because of, the popularity of franchises, series, things of that nature, I have been toying with the idea of maybe writing a sequel to Orange Mound, my novel Orange Mound. I do have a little idea rattling around in my head for a sequel idea. And if I decide to work on it and it comes out well, then perhaps I might create a third. That's the one kind of property, so to speak, that I've created, that I've given a little thought to about, like turning into a trilogy or whatever.
Is that because there are so many characters involved? Is it like a neighborhood of people?
No, because actually, like Orange Mound is a small story. It's got a small cast of characters. it's set in the neighborhood, but it's not about the neighborhood, if that makes sense. But I do see that as kind of a hook because we explored different places that would be familiar to people, who were in Memphis. But yeah, it's not, it would just be, another story in kind of like a familiar neighborhood, but not because of number of characters or anything. No.
Jay, let's emphasize the fact that you said previously that you don't like sequels, maybe even hate sequels. But let's say I'm a producer and I come to you and I say, I want to make a trilogy of your novel, Orange Mound, which is sort of loosely based on, is it Memphis or Nashville?
Memphis.
Memphis, I'm
right.
sorry, okay. And this beauty shop and there's different nefarious characters in there and some good, some bad. And I'd like to take that property and turn it into a trilogy.
I mean,
Trust me, Jay. I'm on your
of course,
side.
I trust you. We could certainly have that talk. I look, I want to make movies. I want to tell stories. And whereas I don't believe that every story needs a sequel, sure, we can do this. I mean, I'm in it for the art, but I'm also in it for the commerce. I want to make some money, and I understand that this is a business, show business, and if sequels are put on the table and said, hey, let's discuss this, I can at least have the discussion. And if I feel that there is a story that can be told with these characters that deserves to be expanded, into future installments, then sure, why not? I the reason why I have this disdain for sequels is because I feel that a lot of stories are told like they're these contained entities, right? You tell the story and it's done. Most stories are not crafted to be sequelized, and so with the sequel, you're almost trying to force it. And that's where the problem comes in for me. There's a sequel that came out this year, and I'm not going to name it. It wasn't bad. I actually had fun with it. But for me, it ruined the legacy of the original because that story was told so beautifully. And it's such a classic story, such a classic film, that a sequel is unnecessary. And I don't think that the sequel added anything. And, people to this day are still talking about the original. I feel like the sequel came and went. And it doesn't feel like it has the lasting power of the original.
So it's better sometimes to just let great work stand on its own.
Absolutely.
Don't try to belabor it, and then it ends up ruining.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.